We're starting to figure out what the roadmap for a Bungie-controlled Destiny looks like.
This is one of the most exciting times. We're beginning to form up the muscles to make Destiny a quick reacting live game, and I can only see it getting better from here.
This is just the beginning of a conversation that we're going to have with you about where Destiny can go. Right now, the team's upstairs testing Season of Opulence.
We're already building plans for how to make the thing comes out after that even better.
There's a thing that comes out after that?
Well, oh, for the next one.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Destiny. As you know, we just began Season of the Drifter, and last week Bungie showed us what to expect in the season through a pretty well put together Vidoc. It's actually one of my favorite Vidocs in a while, and I was thinking about why, then I realized it wasn't about the content itself, but rather the last 30 seconds of it, which I played for you at the top of this video, in which they go over the future of the franchise. This is the first time Bungie has really spoken on the future of Destiny since their separation with Activision. So in this video, we're going to take a deeper look at just that last 30 seconds, what it might be telling us about the next Destiny, and my ideas for pricing of the next game, along with my recommendations for it to have early access. Before we begin, I want to give a quick shout out to our patrons. As many of you know, our podcast is our cornerstone, and it wouldn't be possible without your generous contributions. If you want to learn more about how you can support the channel, check out our Patreon, links down below. Anyways, let's get into it. So we already knew that Bungie split with Activision transferring all publishing rights over to Bungie. It's been rumored that the split was a mutual decision, but on the Bungie side, it's likely happened due to creative differences about the direction Destiny was going. Activision is typically a fan of their big, loud, tentpole releases, and they spent a lot of money to prop it up as one of their top properties. A lot of their trade show and retail setups include Destiny alongside Call of Duty. On the flip side, from what we could tell previously, Bungie wants Destiny to be a single-release live service game with regular updates, which has essentially been now confirmed, as we'll talk about in just a moment. Now, for the sake of the video, again, just like last time, we'll proceed with the assumption that Bungie will in fact develop and release another title to fulfill their vision for the plans of Destiny, instead of just adding on to Destiny 2. I've mentioned before that the Destiny 2 platform is simply not designed to support a radical change like that, with them barely being able to make Forsaken work. Watch my previous video on the series to learn more, where I talk about Year 1 scar tissue. To learn more, click the link below. But anyways, the statements made at the end of the Vidoc are by game director Luke Smith and design lead Ryan Paradis. I was pretty excited to see Luke, as we haven't really heard from him since the last Bungie podcast back in November, where they addressed the XP controversy and the endgame shortcomings. So naturally, seeing Luke again was joyous and reassuring to a pretty good degree, and that he did the best that he could with the mess of a development cycle that was both the launch of Destiny 1 and Destiny 2. But then again, he brought us Vault of Glass, and he was the creative mind behind The Taken King, so there's that. We don't know much about what he's working on right now, but we can safely assume that it's whatever is going to be the next release of Destiny. Again, in this video, we'll just call that Destiny 3 to keep things simple, but I really don't expect that they'll call it that. So, for the first statement, it's made by Luke Smith. It says the following.
We're starting to figure out what the roadmap for a Bungie-controlled Destiny looks like.
This is pretty telling and confirms some suspicions about the relationship between Activision and Bungie that before was just purely speculative. There are reports of Bungie employees cheering and popping champagne when they heard the announcement of the separation, and this now gives us a bit more context as to why. First off, for Luke to even say this is a pretty big deal. It essentially says that Bungie had very little in the sense of final decision making, and Activision's influence must have been far greater than we realize for this to have been needed to be said at all. It also kind of implies that they have been releasing a product that in their heart of hearts knows doesn't live up to their own standards or to the vision of the franchise, and that's heartbreaking. Or perhaps it's a realization that they came to more recently, but it still saddens me a little bit. Now, I do have to be clear and mention that this doesn't absolve Bungie from guilt. They still have made plenty of bad decisions. Eververse, for instance, is one of them. At least its execution at the launch of Destiny 2. People even to this day are very quick to blame Activision for the invention of Eververse, but believe me, that it was 100% a Bungie decision, although you can make the argument that they had to make that in order to meet their contractually agreed upon revenue goals. Now, they only have to answer to themselves, but of course they also have to answer to their fans and to their stockholders as well, so revenue is still going to be a very important aspect. But anyways, that's just focusing on two of the words in the statement, really, Bungie controlled. Let's talk about what he's actually saying. They're developing the roadmap for the future of Destiny. Now this leads nicely into the next statement made by Ryan Paratus.
We're beginning to form up the muscles to make Destiny a quick reacting live game.
Now, this can be interpreted to be in reference to just the annual pass, but I think it's more than that. The fact that the term live game is even in their vocabulary is a big deal. This essentially means that they want to be quicker in responding to feedback, which hopefully leads to more improvements at a more reliable cadence. Destiny 3 needs this to the nth degree. Currently, most of the team at Bungie is likely working on Destiny 3, with a subsection working on the current season and the annual pass content. So imagine a world where most of Bungie is working on the game you're playing right now instead of something that's coming years from now, working to continuously improve the core platform of the game. Destiny 3 needs to be a single platform release that carries it for the next 10 years. We don't need massive reboots to systems or progression resets to keep it relevant. The gaming landscape isn't what it used to be even 5 years ago, and Destiny needs to adapt to the times. And I think they mean to do just that. This actually leads pretty well into the next statement by Luke Smith that says,
"This is just the beginning of a conversation that we're going to have with you about where Destiny can go."
This almost gave me chills during the video. Now, it's very clear that Season of the Drifter was developed entirely in-house, with Vicarious Visions working on Black Armory and Penumbra, the latter of which is now officially called Season of Opulence. You may have noticed the complete absence of the title Joker's Wild, and that's for a good reason. It looks like Bungie is dropping the whole DLC naming structure. Everything for this release is under the umbrella of Season of the Drifter, a release that features new things for the base D2 owners, Forsaken owners, and Annual Pass owners, so 3 tiers of ownership. I think they're doing this to lessen the divide that happens at the start of a season when you throw terms around like Black Armory or Joker's Wild. Luke spilled the beans on Season 7 being officially called Season of Opulence with no mention of the term Penumbra. I think this is extremely telling about their shift in design philosophy in Destiny. They clearly like the different seasons, and I don't blame them. It works really well. You can use the season title to inform the theme of the release, and it keeps things a bit more coherent and easy to follow. And this is what Destiny 3 needs to continue, which leads me to pricing. Pricing is always going to be controversial. There's never going to be a right answer. It's going to be impossible to please everyone. So if you don't like this idea, please kindly give your suggestions down below in the comments. And just keep in mind that this is just one suggestion. So let's address the elephant in the room. The game can't be free. It just can't. They simply won't have the bankroll to afford it. And before you mention Warframe, Digital Extremes has less than 10% of the employees that Bungie does. So they can probably get by with microtransactions. And The Witcher 3 is funded by their government, so of course they could afford not to charge for DLC. Plus they kind of did charge for DLC with the Heart of Stone and Blood and Wine expansions. What my point is that Bungie needs to charge its players on a regular basis in order to sustain development costs. But how can they do this in a way that doesn't divide its audience and doesn't seem greedy? My idea is this. Charge $40 for the base game, kind of like Overwatch, but also offer a seasonal vanity pass. Take the idea straight from, not Fortnite, but from themselves. In year 1 of Destiny, a few years ago, Bungie experimented with microtransactions by selling an optional record book for the first SRL event. It cost $10, but was filled with challenges that netted you cosmetic armor sets, shaders, emblems, and sparrows. I actually really liked this idea at the time, and I think it might be their key to success here. They could release 2 books per season, one themed after the season itself, and one after one of the holiday events. Yes, the content would be exclusive to that record book, but it's completely vanity. It's completely optional. You don't have to take part in it. But because you paid less than games typically cost, i.e. $40 for the game, you might be inclined to spend a little bit more money since you're contributing to the success of the developer directly. And of course, this does mean that you wouldn't be paying a dime for any kind of annual pass or season pass. You don't pay for extra content. That stuff is always free, except for when you come to the big annual release, which will again cost you another $40. So think Taken King or Forsaken, you spend $40, you get that release, and then you get the entire year worth of content. You don't have to pay for an extra annual pass. In fact, and this is going to be controversial for sure, the game will only ever cost you $40 to jump in, meaning when the annual expansion comes out, you don't need to also pay for the base game or last year's annual expansion. You just pay the $40 and you're in. People complain about price drops all the time. They tell tales of how they spend over $200, etc., etc. The reality is price drops are kind of necessary, and in this case, it would be vital in onboarding a continuous stream of new customers, which you would want to do for a platform that is supposed to last 10 years. So that's the model, $40 for the game, everything else is optional. Finally, let's talk about early access. I firmly believe that Destiny could really benefit from having some kind of early access. It's too late for D2, but they could bake that into D3. Before, let's say, 6 months up until release, have the game come out as early access. Have it be the full game, but have it be early access. So you might be asking, well, what's the point? The whole point of that is to, one, get customers into your game, get them playing it, and get them to fall in love with it, but also it sets it as early access on consoles, which means you can have updates at a much more regular pace. Games like Fortnite can update themselves daily if they wanted to. That's because they don't have to go through certification with Sony or Microsoft in order to release an update to the console. If you're a full-fledged released game, you have a lot more red tape to go through. A typical Destiny update might take up to 2 weeks for it to get approved. But releasing it first in early access would mean that they can afford to listen to their community and make big radical changes to make sure that the game is to where it's supposed to be before it's released. Of course, for the early access, I wouldn't have the entire game, maybe not even the campaign, but maybe open up Patrol, Strikes, Crucible, Gambit, those types of things, whatever that looks like for Destiny 3. At this point, it's all about quality of life, bugs, and balance, which a few other games that are currently out could have probably benefited a lot more from. The developers at Bungie are very intelligent people, and I fully expect for them to learn from other people's mistakes. But anyways, these are just a few ideas of mine for the release of Destiny 3 as far as its pricing, early access, and what I'd like the game to be for the next 10 years. Again, if you have ideas of your own, I'd love to read them down below and we can talk about this a lot more. As always, if you enjoyed this video, a positive rating is much appreciated, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for much more gaming content right here on Nerd On TV. Thanks for watching, happy gaming, and I will see you all next time.